G'day, 25th of April 2026. Very important day on the Australian calendar. It is the Anzac Day. And for this, I acknowledge the Lord Jesus for providing the men and women who have served this country. Thank you to all. All right, my name is George. Let's get on with today's message of hope. So, a young man named Jaden was working at a shift at a Chick-fil-A in the United States recently, of course, when he walked into a toilet and found a bag. And you know what? $10,000 of cash was inside. Yep. I say it again, $10,000 in a toilet. Unbelievable, right? If I ever go back to America again, I would love to try a Chick-fil-A. If you have, put it in a comment, tell me what your experience was. Was the food nice? How was the service? Hey, let me know. Now, I want you to hold that scenario for a moment. Not the news story version, where you already know how it ends, really, but the raw version. I'm talking about the before, you're on the shift, not particularly well paid, right? Nobody saw you walk in. Nobody else is there with you in the toilet. The bag is just sitting there. Just imagine, okay? So let me ask you a question. What would you do if you saw that bag? So I can tell you, Jaden returned it, every single dollar. And of course, when reporters asked him about it afterwards, he said he was in the right place at the right time. That makes sense to me. But more than that, his faith teaches him to do what's right and to care for others. I think this is a good man reporting. Now, good on him, genuinely. I really like that. But the more honest thought that arrived in me immediately after reading that story, not the admiring one, the uncomfortable one underneath it, was this. How certain am I that I would have done the same? If it was me, forget about $10,000, even say $1,000. What would I do with it? And what would I do? Not in theory, but in the actual moment, with the bag in my hand, that cash, right? And I thought about that question more carefully than I expected to. Because I like to think. Because here is what I know about myself. Let me give you a story. As you know, I used to work at a payday lending company, and part of the role was counting the cash in the till, and the correct procedure was always to count in front of a colleague, right? It's a second pair of eyes on every note. You just want to cover yourself, protect yourself. But in many of the cases, there wasn't always a colleague available, unfortunately, because we had to move people around the store to do things. And particularly at the end of the shift when everybody's busy, right? Or towards the end of the shift. Sometimes you were the only one left and you just have to manage the crowd as well. So I remember one afternoon, after we closed for the day, I tallied the register and came up $500 short. Something around that figure. Let's call it 500. Now, I couldn't account for it because I'm a person who's very diligent, just counting the till, watching my money, and make sure everything is accountable. Anyway, like I said, I counted again because I was getting paranoid. Once I counted, twice I counted, third time I counted, I came up short. Now, obviously, I had to report it to my manager, and I was pretty anxious, right? Because $500 just doesn't vanish from the till. Plus, there are recordings. I mean, it either goes out as an error or doesn't leave at all. And neither of those options was comfortable. So my manager and I stayed back after closing hours and we watched the CCTV footage. We watched it together at least 3 times. And there it was. Apparently, notes were sticking together in one transaction, and one I had handed over extra cash without realizing it. Now, the borrower had walked out $500 ahead, and she wasn't returning calls when my manager made it on that day. And I remember the feeling of watching myself on that footage with a very particular clarity. Yes, embarrassment about the error, yes. But underneath that, something more uncomfortable is that I was sitting there genuinely hoping that this person would make the right choice. That she'll come back and she'll do the honest thing. Because she was sort of a regular customer and we knew who she was. Anyway, she eventually did because she came back into the store wanting to borrow again. And at that time, my manager dealt with it directly. Yes, he had to deduct it from the loan. Now, my manager said she rang asking very specific if I was on a shift during that time when she wanted to come in the store. So she planned this. Anyway, but I remember thinking in the days after, what if she didn't come back? What if she just ghosted on us, right? How do we deal with the shortfall? And then the question I had to ask honestly, if our position had been reversed, if I had walked away from a cash transaction and discovered later that I received $500 I wasn't owed, what would I have actually done? Honestly, right? Because it's easy to answer that in hindsight. Remarkably easy, I'm sure. You can say the right thing in hindsight without it costing you a single thing. But the hindsight isn't where your character lives, does it? Think about it. Yeah. Oh, by the way, if this kind of content is useful to you, please do me a favor, hit the like button, be a subscriber to this channel, and share this video far and wide. Okay? It's going to help me with the algorithm. It's going to help more people. And again, also put in your comment what kind of things you like to see. Back to the story. Now, here's what Jesus said about that moment. And you'll find it in Luke chapter 16, verse 10. Here we go. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. Equal proportion. Now I want you to hear what Jesus is actually saying there. He is not offering career advice. Far from it. He's not making a point about the reward of hard work. He is making a character observation. What you do when the amount is small is the most accurate predictor of what you will do when the amount is large. There's a lot of truth in that. You probably see it in life, right? From your other people, probably colleagues. Doesn't have to be about money anyway. Could be about time. Now, $10,000 in the toilet is not a small test, is it? Most of us, I dare imagine, would never face it. But the small version of it, perhaps the checkout that undercharged you by $15. Hey, even the ATM that dispensed twice, unlikely. Dispensed twice what you requested. Or even the mobile transfer that arrived twice by mistake. How about the cash transaction? You know, a shopkeeper forgot to record. That test is constant. And it arrives quietly, without announcement, without no one watching too. No one recording. And every time it does, you are not simply making a financial decision, actually. You are instead rehearsing a response. Now, of course, I imagine someone watching this is thinking, oh, surely it depends on the circumstances, right? Yeah, okay. I mean, a large corporation versus an individual. A trivial amount versus a significant one, whether you need it or not. Well, that instinct is worth examining honestly. Let's examine it together, right? I mean, what we're really asking when we ask, does it depend on the circumstances, is whether integrity has a sliding scale, whether the standard adjusts based on who can afford the loss. We think like that, right? Whether the threshold for honesty goes up as the amount goes down. That's very interesting, yeah. So Luke 16 verse 10 suggests otherwise. So go back and read it if you want to, rewind. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. So the very little is where the measurement happens. So it's not in the exceptional moment, but in the ordinary, it's repeated, unremarkable moments when nobody is scoring you. No one's watching. And here's something I thought about since I understood it properly. The person who reasons their way into keeping the extra change from a corporation will reason their way into the next thing too, because it's a habitual thing. And yeah, I mean, come on, that's not a judgment, it's just how human beings work. We are extraordinarily talented at constructing justifications for what we already decided what we wanted to do, right? We've got a creative mind. Now, there's something else about the Chick-fil-A story that caught my attention. Something that had nothing to do with toilet. Are you ready? And I've read, according to the website, the company closes every Sunday. Not for operational reasons, believe it or not, but because the founders said, well, their faith said that they belong to rest and to God for those who want to worship Him. What a striking contrast. I mean, in an industry where Sunday trade is often among the strongest of the week because every competitor is opening and earning. But yet, Chick-fil-A, they remain to be closed every week by conviction. Hallelujah. And I recognize that thread from our years working in Singapore too, when I was in Singapore. There's a well-known shopping complex on Orchard Road. It's called Tangs, T-A-N-G-S. So go and visit that place. Well, the Tang family who founded it were devout Christians. And for years, they did not open the store on Sundays. Right? In one of the most commercially competitive retail environments in Asia, that is. Okay? On arguably the busiest shopping street in the region. This is Orchard Road we're talking about. Of course, downtown Singapore City. But it's closed. Okay? That's not a policy statement, but that is a settled answer to a prior question about who the business ultimately belongs to. And they made a statement clearly. And what it exists to honor. So the financial cost of closing every Sunday gets paid every week. Nobody forced them to pay it. They chose to pay it. But of course that policy has changed when the founder's son took over the business, and I think in year 2000 they started opening the shop on Sundays. Hey, I'm not here to judge. Well, what do you do with the money when the pressure's on? When the bag's sitting there and nobody's watching? When it'll be genuinely easy to go the other way? That's not a financial decision, I imagine, because I would put it simply, it's a character declaration. And here's where I want to put that directly to you. You're not going to likely to find $10,000 in the toilet this week. If you do, I'd like to know. Not that I don't expect you to tell everyone, I guess. It's a lot of money. Probably not ever. But the version of that test that fits in your wallet, I'm talking about the extra change, I'm talking about that, the underbilled invoice, the banking error in your favor, that is coming. Because that's life. Maybe it already came and you haven't resolved it yet. Friends, what does your character actually look like when a small test arrives? And a small test arrives for purpose in life. It's not what you like it to look like. Not you would say if someone asks, what does it actually look like at the checkout? Again, at the ATM, in the moment when the right choice costs you something and nobody alive would know if you chose differently. Because I'm telling you, Luke chapter 16, verse 10, you can memorize it, is not a warning for dishonest people. It's a mirror for the ordinary people, like me. So let me repeat again. One who is faithful in a little, very little, is also faithful in much. That's why we have the parable of the talents, right? Now, Jaden didn't discover his integrity in that toilet. He walked in it with him. Long before everyone was watching, long before any bag was sitting on any counter, a question had already been settled in him. And that question is, what do I do when doing the right thing costs me something? Chick-fil-A, Tangs, a young man on a ship with a bag at his feet. That's my point. The same question, the same thread, the same answer arrived at before the test, not during it. So let me ask you, what does your answer look like today? Just picture it. When the amount is small enough that nobody would notice and nobody but God would know. How would you face the test? Okay, guys, it's going to be a smashing good day today. I hope it's the same for you. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, share the video, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.